So I'm here with Michael Payne. He's the vice chair of the Charlottesville chapter of the Democratic Socialists of America, DSA. We're in the narrow street where Heather Heyer was killed yesterday and dozens more injured. Michael, you were here yesterday when this happened. Can you walk us through what you saw?
By this point, the white supremacist and white nationalist and fascist groups had been pushed to McIntyre Park, which is about a 40-minute walk from here, and it had been that way for several hours. So it was just local residents and community members sort of peacefully marching through this area, really in celebration of having the city back. And for several hours there had been no confrontations, no alt-right agitators or anything like that. And so people were marching down Water Street on the other end of this road and started to turn here to march back to Justice Park, where there was a community event. And people had started to turn down this road, filled it up, about a third of the way through. And a car started coming down from here, and right about here, sped up about 40, 50 miles an hour, and drove straight into the crowd. This entire street was filled with people. They drove into the crowd. There were two cars there waiting to turn. It hit those two cars, ran them into the crowd, and then they reversed back out of this street, again about 40, 50 miles an hour. And before they reversed, after they hit, they backed up a little, and then while people were still on the ground and fallen, and they ran over the crowd again, and then they reversed out of here about 40, 50 miles an hour, tried to get out of here and tried to leave the town, and were apprehended. So,
what did you do when you saw this happen?
I was right around the corner, and I initially thought a bomb had gone off. I just heard huge noise, saw debris fly out, bodies fly, and it was just an immediate reaction to flee. There were two people on, I don't know who they were, but two people on small motorcycles right behind me, and I didn't know if another car was going to come or if this was, was more of a coordinated attack. And the people around just in this alley were jumping to the corner. Just pressed up against the wall. And there were people who had been trained as medics who just rushed to the area. And it was several minutes before any police or ambulance was in the area.
Let's walk down the alley and go to the memorial at the end of it. What was everyone saying as all this was happening?
Just total shock, terror. No one was really sure exactly what was happening. There were people who were trying to keep any kind of mass stampede or anything like that from happening, and then there were medics who were rushing to the area to take care of people who had been pinned against the cars.
That nighttime rally of white supremacists the night before, were you around for that?
I was in the area earlier that night. I wasn't directly there, but from what I heard, I was attended briefly. There was a service at a church right across from the rotunda, and that had filled up. Wasn't able to make it in because they were over capacity. And after that service ended, about 300-400 people from neo-Nazi groups with lit torches walked to where that service was and tried to intimidate people from leaving. So the people in there were told not to leave. And then they marched to the rotunda, which is right across the street where there's a statue of Thomas Jefferson. And there were UVA students who had surrounded themselves, locking arms around the statue to protest their presence and chanting Black Lives Matter and other things. And the neo-Nazis completely surrounded them. It was 20, 30 students locked arms around the statue in a circle, and all around them, hundreds of neo-Nazis with torches, and they just started beating them with the torches and macing them and assaulting them. And when that began, there were no police at all in the area. There were not police around when the torch rally began. There were not police who prevented it from happening. And the people who were there, some of the people who were in that circle, really thought they were going to die. They thought, this is it. And some of those same students who locked their arms were literally some of the same people who were right here and got hit by the car.
That police response has been heavily criticized, their conduct throughout these several days of protest. Can you talk more about that, about how they've conducted themselves as these white supremacists have descended upon Charlottesville?
Yeah, well, on Friday night, as I said, the police just weren't there at all when it began. They didn't prevent the march of 300-400 Nazis with lit torches. They didn't prevent them from trying to get people out of the church service. They weren't there when they started assaulting students. And then they showed up and they dispersed the crowd. And in Emancipation Park, which was where the Lee statue is, which is where earlier on Saturday most of the violence had been, at the beginning of the day, police just stood back, and it was really an open brawl initiated by these white supremacist groups. There were clergy and community members who had trained and engaged in peaceful, nonviolent direct action, and they had linked arms in a line to prevent some of these white supremacist groups from coming into the park and to, just bear moral witness to that event. And the police were around just watching them be assaulted. And Cornel West, I think, said just today that if it weren't for counter-protesters against the white supremacists in that park at the area, I think his direct words, we would have been crushed like cockroaches. There were a lot of militia members in full camo with assault rifles who some people initially thought were police, but they were not. They were part of the white supremacist rally, and they were allowed to come in. The police allowed them to come in to Emancipation Park several hours before their permit began, which was also led to, I think, a lot of instability. And when this happened, when the terrorist attack occurred, where they drove their car into the crowd, there were no police in this area at all. At all. People were, marching down, and it was sort of eerie. People were commenting. It was a very celebratory mood, but people were commenting, there's no police here at all. Isn't that kind of weird? And then they drove their car down here, ran into the crowd, and it was a little, at least a few minutes before police or ambulance came. I saw pictures and reports, I don't know if it's accurate, but I saw there were police on the mall at a gelato store about 5 minutes getting ice cream before this happened. And I think what's maybe most irresponsible about it is the way the attack occurred, the terrorist attack occurred. I think it's very possible that this was not any kind of lone wolf attack. It was something that was coordinated. The person who was in the car and carried out the terrorist attack was with one of the alt-right groups earlier in the day of the demonstration. There are pictures of him in their uniform and a shield. He was a member of that group, and I think it's a big question whether there were other people who were waiting for an opportunity to do this and coordinated the attack, because as you can see, this is an area where they were able to, as they intended to do, kill people.
It's a narrow little street, and especially if it's jammed with people, I can only imagine the chaos and the carnage that it could cause.
Yeah. As I said, I mean, it was, you know, just ran into literally bodies flying backwards, people over the car, and then while people were still on the ground, reversed, ran over them again, and reversed out of here at 50 miles an hour and tried to flee town. And they got a decent distance before. I mean, you can see in the when they were driving down here, there was no one near their car at all. They just sped up, and the force of hitting the people, their bumper was on the ground. I mean, the car was damaged. It was clear they came in with the intent to commit a terrorist act that would kill people, and I think they wanted to send a message that for residents of this city, it's not safe. I mean, of course, this was the biggest one, but throughout the day, at that Water Street parking garage right down there earlier in the day, there was a black resident here, about 20 years old. One of the alt-right groups just surrounded him and started beating him with flagpoles and sticks at the entrance of that parking garage, and there were no police there. Someone who was filming it kicked one of the alt-right people in the back just so he could get away, and he ran away, but his head was busted in, and there were no police there. And if he hadn't have kicked him, I mean, he might have died there.
Has anybody been arrested for that?
No. The person driving this car was arrested, but I think the Charlottesville police announced that only 3 people were apprehended that day. And no one was arrested for beating students at the Jefferson statue. No one was arrested for coordinating this terrorist attack. No one was arrested at Emancipation Park when they were macing people. They threw bottles of pee at clergy. They were attacking them with rocks. The person who organized this Unite the Right rally, Jason Kessler, was allowed to hold a press conference in front of City Hall earlier today. And the police escorted him out because he felt scared that people had shown up to yell shame at him when people were murdered in a terrorist attack here. So,
All right. Michael, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.